In a cave in northern Spain, researchers scraped hardened plaque off the teeth of a Neanderthal. Inside it, they found DNA. Not his DNA, the DNA of the microbes that had lived in his mouth. And one of those microbes was a strain that also turns up in the mouths of ancient modern humans. The same strain, which means at some point, something passed from one mouth to another. That's roughly 120,000 years ago. It's the oldest hint we have of any of this. So, when did humans start kissing? The answer involves things you are not expecting. Because before we go backwards, we have to kill an assumption. Kissing is not universal. It feels universal. It's in every film. It's the ending of nearly every story you were raised on. But in 2015, anthropologists went through 168 cultures around the world. They were looking for one specific thing: romantic kissing, mouth to mouth, deliberately, between partners. They found it in fewer than half of them, under 50%. And here's the detail that reframes the whole question. It was rarest among hunter-gatherers, which is exactly the kind of society humans lived in for about 95% of our history. Some groups, on being shown it by visiting Westerners, found the whole thing genuinely revolting, not shy about it, not prudish, disgusted, roughly how you'd react to somebody licking a doorknob. So if it isn't universal and it isn't instinctive, then where on earth does it come from? The leading idea is that kissing didn't begin as romance at all. It began as feeding. Human infants have a problem. Their teeth arrive late, and most adult food is tough. So across an enormous range of cultures, a parent chews food first and passes it straight to the baby. It's called pre-mastication, or kiss feeding. It is still done in many places in the world today. Great apes do a version of it. It's very old, and it is entirely, boringly practical. But what it produces is a gesture. Two mouths, close together, meaning I am taking care of you. And gestures like that get reused. That's how an enormous amount of human behavior actually works. The gesture that meant care between a parent and a child becomes the gesture that means care in general. That's a theory, not a proof, but it explains why the gesture exists before the romance does. It helps that we aren't alone in this. Bonobos kiss, openly, constantly, and with tongue. Chimpanzees press their mouths together after fights as a way of making up. Several other primates do too, which suggests the raw ingredient is genuinely ancient. What's recent is what we decided it meant. So when does the actual record start? For a long time, the answer everyone gave was India. Around 3,500 years ago, in Sanskrit texts, describing something unmistakably romantic. Then, in 2023, two researchers pointed at something everybody had been walking straight past: Mesopotamian clay tablets, cuneiform, roughly 4,500 years old, and they describe kissing, casually, as an ordinary, unremarkable part of romantic life, not being invented, not being explained to anyone, just happening, the way you'd mention holding hands. Which is the tell. Nobody bothers explaining something ordinary. It was already old when they wrote it down. There are even texts separating the kiss you'd give a lover from the kiss you'd give in public. Now the story you may already have heard, that Alexander the Great's armies carried kissing westward. It's a great story. Conquest spreading a custom across continents. It's in an enormous number of articles. It's also almost certainly wrong. The Mesopotamian evidence sits a full 1,000 years before Alexander, and the same evidence appears in Egypt at roughly the same time, with no contact story to explain it. What that pattern actually suggests is far less romantic and much more interesting. Kissing wasn't invented once and exported. It was invented repeatedly, independently, in different places. Because it isn't a technology, it's simply a thing bodies do when they get close enough to each other, which is also why plenty of cultures skipped it completely and did something else instead. Pressing noses together, touching foreheads, sharing breath. All of them mean exactly the same thing. The mouth was never a requirement. It was one option among several, and not the most popular one. Now here's my favorite part, because it's the strangest method anyone has used to date a behavior. You cannot dig up a kiss. It leaves nothing behind. No tool, no bone, no mark on anything at all. So researchers went looking for something that travels by mouth and does leave a permanent record. Viruses, specifically the one that causes cold sores, which passes between people through saliva. By reading its genome across thousands of years, you can watch when its lineages suddenly expand. And one major expansion lines up with the Bronze Age, with migration, with crowded new settlements. Now be careful here, because the researchers themselves are. That's a correlation, not a conclusion. Populations moving and mixing spreads a virus perfectly well with or without anybody kissing at all. But it's a genuinely clever idea, using a disease as a fossil of a behavior that left no fossils. And it's why glandular fever has another name, the kissing disease. The record is still being written, which leaves the last question, and honestly the harder one. Why would anybody do this in the first place? Because objectively, it's odd. You are pressing one wet opening against another wet opening. It transmits illness. It serves no reproductive function whatsoever. It genuinely costs you something. The best explanation on offer is that a kiss is an inspection, a very close, very fast one. At that distance, you are receiving a flood of information you cannot get any other way. Smell, taste, skin, breath, health, almost none of which your conscious mind ever reports back to you. And there's reasonable evidence people use all of that to assess compatibility without knowing they are, which is why a first kiss can end a relationship on the spot. Something reported back. You weren't told what. So, when did ancient humans start kissing? There is no date, and there was never going to be one. There's a gesture that comes from feeding infants, which is enormously old. There's a group of primates who were already doing it long before us, which is older still. There's a written record about 4,500 years deep, describing it as completely routine. And there's roughly half the world that never picked it up at all and got along absolutely fine, which means kissing isn't a human instinct, it's a human habit. And somebody, somewhere, was the first.